pass it over to Jeremy, our esteemed founding member, and his guest, Britt.
Awesome. Thanks, Ward. What's going on?
Hey, welcome.
Maryland. What's going on, everyone?
Yeah,
Yeah, intimate group here, so it'll encourage some hopefully some dialogue on this. We also have limited time, so not exactly like we can dig too deep, but we'll see what we can do as far as scratching the surface on this very important topic. So we're going to talk a bit about the second S in SaaS. I know Britt and I are just getting back from RecFest, where we actually Britt ran a panel, I should say, and I participated in the panel at RecFest talking about this exact topic. It was a really cool panel in terms of like backgrounds, people from a marketing background, people from more of a leadership role. We had implementers from Britt's Olio too. So it was kind of neat to get everyone's perspective on this topic. So real quick about myself, most of you know me here, but in case anybody listens to the recording, basically I started with an HR software vendor, so I actually ran the services aspect of things, so implementing HR payroll benefit systems. And then I started my own company and did selection, implementation, and enhancement of these types of systems for 10 years, and then worked for the acquiring companies for 2.5 years doing more of that same implementation and support work. So very familiar with this topic of services, and look forward to diving in a little bit here. Britt, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jeremy. So Ward, thanks for having us on the call today. And again, kind of like Jeremy, I tell people I'm born and raised in the HR technology space. I've been working on HR tech for the last 20 years. Worked at some companies like RecruitMax and Taleo and some of the bigger names, Oracle of the past. So super excited to be here. And certainly the second S in SaaS is near and dear to my heart, being a huge implementer back in my day. And now I'm on the sales side, so I can kind of see both sides. But yeah, excited to be here. And I know Jeremy's got a good list of topics to talk through. So
yeah, nice. Thanks, Ward. So yeah, let's just dig into it. So I mean, the first thing I wanted to try to do is collectively define what services actually means in the context of SaaS. Even before you talk about that word, I was thinking about this before the call. Like when we say software as a service, I think that's where even before you start working with clients, I feel like that might be where the gap already has started when you start talking about collaborating with clients, because the concept of as a service means that the software actually in some ways is meant to replace the need for any types of services. So anything that the vendors actually provide is almost above and beyond, which is sort of where the rub starts even before you start engaging with a client. But really my main point on this as far as the life cycle of services, what I wanted to cover is that goes, and this was a great topic that we covered down at RecFest, but it's like it goes from the initial interaction with the client, with the prospect, from a sales cycle perspective. If you close that business, now you're dealing with services in the context of implementation services, and then there's the handoff from implementation to your post-implementation support. So when we think about services, it's kind of a faulty view to really just zone in on one of those. You have to kind of look at the life cycle of a client's experience and how you're providing those services across that life cycle.
yeah, Jeremy, and jumping in there, I mean, back in my day when I was running projects for Taleo, I would cringe. The first call we would have with the client would be to go over the SOW. And it was going over the SOW that sales sold them. And the whole time I'm thinking, well, you didn't buy that. You didn't buy that. You opted out of that service. And it was really a tough call. And it really didn't set the project off on a good foot. And so that was, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. Fast forward, we're still seeing some of those handoffs be super rigid and rocky. And some of the things that we're starting to see happen more frequently is in the sales cycle, actually bring in your services team, whether it's your SI partner or your in-house services team. Let's have those conversations up front. And I like to say, now I'm on the sales side, we're the promise makers. Bring in your promise keepers, right? Bring in the people that are actually going to be implementing, doing those services. Like we talked about at RecFest, it's often the services that gets cut right away. And so how do we continue on with that partnership, because yes, the software is there to provide the service, but if you're not using your services team to implement it and to install it correctly, it ends up failing down the road. So
Yeah. Nice. So we wanted to dig in a little bit to kind of what we see, what the two of us see as far as what's working well. And then we'll kind of follow up on the point Britt just made as far as where are there opportunities for doing things better. But in terms of what I see working well, I mean, I guess one thing that I've seen happen quite a bit, especially in the implementation side of things, is that customers have gotten a little bit more accustomed to putting in place kind of this minimum viable product as part of that initial implementation. You know, back when I was working at NewView back in the day, they all expected the moon out of the gate. And that not only led to, you know, complications with how long it might take, it led to scope creep, it led to, you know, potential, not just configurations, but we were making actual enhancements to the system, so customizations. So now that, you know, customers have realized that they can still make changes even after they've gone live, I think that is one good thing that I've seen. But you really have to bop them over the head to make sure that they stay in that box, because their inclination is always to try to expand into as much of the suite as they can. And I know that was something that you guys mentioned, Britt, that you run into, and you do try to keep the customer into that in that box out of the gate.
yeah, I mean, you have this little budget to do this amount of work, and that amount of work obviously creeps up the longer you push the project out, if you do a phase 1, a phase 2. So it's very important to set those expectations up front. Some of the things we're seeing, back to your main point, that's doing what we're seeing things do well, is maybe bake in there post go live support, or set an hourly rate for that. We're actually negotiating that into some of our contracts right now, giving them a remote system admin. So it's not expected that, hey, we're going to turn this system on, we're going to do your implementation, and then we're going to hand you the keys to the castle. It's, yes, we're going to do all of that. We're going to also hand you the keys, but then we're also going to have a side seat driver there ready and willing to help support you guys, because you can try to do as much as you can to mitigate, you know, trying to configure everything you can up front, but you're always going to have changes after the users start using the tool. And it's just, it's by nature of SaaS. And so as your new users are using the tool, they're going to come up with new enhancements, new configuration requests, and you got to expect to have post go live support there to help you. So,
yeah. And Katrina just backed that up. So, you know, that is, the topic is like what's working well, but then we're going to, you know, transition to what's not working. I guess I'll kind of combine them in that if a software vendor is doing things well, it means that they're managing. I feel like the connection between sales and implementation, and then the connection between implementation and support, feels like this, who cares? Like it's, you know, this amorphous area. The software vendors that are doing well are the ones that do that handoff successfully. And ideally you either have people reaching back from implementation into the sales cycle, salespeople reaching into implementation, and the same thing in support and implementation, or you just have kind of one person or one small group that's responsible for the entire customer life cycle, you know, and so they're going to pick up on where there's gaps and where maybe the handoff was clunky, because in the end, sales does tend to overcommit to some things. Sorry, Britt. And in the end,
okay.
You know, implementation does sometimes leave some things open, and those open things and those miscommunications up front are, I've just seen so many clients who say that they're dissatisfied, and you dig in, and that's exactly where things have fallen apart. It's not about, oh, the product didn't do this, the product didn't do that. It's like the service literally was what either caused success or failure.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. I think so often, I mean, sitting on the sales side for the last decade, it's always about the product. It's, you know, doing the product demos, doing the scripted demos. It's all about the demo of the product, and it's less about how that product gets implemented. And so what we're trying to encourage, at least in the beginning in the sales cycles, like, yes, we're going to do product demos, but then we need to bring in and communicate with the services team and let them talk to you about the implementation. Don't let the sales guys talk to you about implementation. Let the services team do that. And one important thing to note is not all software vendors service their own products, right? So at Olio, we have our own implementation services in-house, are all employees of Olio. But if you look elsewhere at some of the other providers, they oftentimes use external SIs or service implementers. There's good and bad of both worlds, right? So at Olio, not having a broad range of SIs, the busier we get, the more time in which we have to kind of push out our implementations start date. So we may sign a deal today. We may tell a new customer, hey, you're not going to actually start implementation until January 1 because we have implementations in process. The bad side of an SI is that you're dealing now with a completely different company, completely different team, and likely weren't a part of the sales cycle. And so now the vendor's kind of like, okay, the deal's signed, go and work with this SI. Now, those SIs have done probably hundreds of implementations with that vendor. Everything probably works, they've got it down to a wire, but they oftentimes are more expensive because those SIs do need to make a profit as well. So understanding that in the beginning, I think, is a big thing for a lot of the clients that are out there looking at new technologies.
Awesome.
There's a
just
question.
keeping an eye out for questions. So sorry, did you have a point, Britt?
No, that was me. Sorry. I see Marilyn came on camera. I didn't know if she had a question.
I could spend all day on this topic as a recovering SI.
Get
So,
2 minutes.
and
2 minutes.
but the thing is that I think the problem that we have is when the investors don't value service on the books. And so there's this idea of basically the more autopilot things can go, the better the valuation, if you would. The problem with that is when you're dealing with enterprise and at scale, there's so much complexity. And so going back to our conversation from this morning about the moat, one of my predictions, I don't know how long it'll be, but one of my predictions is that if the moat is set up to be the quality of service, and you've got high net promoter scores, you've got high customer retention, then this transactional perspective of looking at customer success and implementation as a cost, we got to change that.
Yeah.
So if we have to tie the differentiator back to valuation. And when the accountants get in there, I'm gonna rip on accountants for a moment. When the accountants get in there, they try to basically pull that out. They don't understand that that's part of the moat.
Yeah, they just want the recurring revenue from the software. That's been the rub for about 5 or 6 years, and
that goes back to early days, right? Why is it that you have when SuccessFactors exited $3.4 billion and they weren't profitable? How could that be? They don't understand. They didn't understand the cash flow at that point in time. But what Lars did is he axed like 300 people before they got acquired.
Yeah.
A lot of them were in services, and they ended up actually in the community that I grew up in with SAP SuccessFactors. So anyway, I just think that what you're saying here, Jeremy, is so, and Brett, is so important that we need, it's got to be tied to differentiation and business value. And because of generative, we can change that conversation.
Yeah, that was one of the last bullet points, was getting into generative. I guess I just want to respond to that comment, which is that if it is going to continue the same way, where investors are, from a valuation standpoint, are discrediting service and they don't want you to be a service provider, it's still incumbent upon the software providers to maintain a level of control of who is touching their clients, and so, because, as you said, from a net promoter score perspective, that is their livelihood. So that is entirely the rub right there. If you completely delegate that to other groups, and Britt was talking about some of the trends that we're seeing, like, you're using contractors, you're offshoring some services, it's just, you're putting your software company's future in other people's hands, which it can be successful. It sure can. And you can prove out that you got the software and you got the partner ecosystem that can deliver the services. but it can also sink the ship. You know, if you have too many escalations, if you have too many clients who hear like, oh, we don't have access to that part of the system, or, you know, like you really need both the technology, the methodology, like everything needs to be in lockstep, or else you're going to end up in a really bad place. So
That's, yeah, lockstep. That's a good thing. And it's great to have both of you on today. Sorry it ran so short. We'll take that under advisement for our next time we do a member featured day. It's never seems to be enough time in the day, but that was really insightful. And Britt, thanks for joining. Jeremy, thanks for being a member, and really appreciate all that you both do. All in the future.